coming down.
Sure that affects me a lot.
Did you not get my copy?
You never hit start.
Oh, I did ever see if I hit start.
Sorry. Anybody
Okay,
want to speak?
No coffee.
I hit start.
Thank you. I don't need to get it, Jim, that's fine. Is that on? Alright. Close enough to 5:30. I'm calling to order this regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Bandera on Thursday, August 15, 2019 at 5:30 p.m. All council members are present, City Administrator is present, and City Secretary is present. Do we have anyone here tonight who would like to lead us in a prayer before we get started? Okay, thank you. Then would you rise for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alright, item 3 is the visitors to be heard and no one signed up. Item 4 is the consent agenda. Item A, approves the minutes from the Board of Adjustments meeting on July 24, 2019, and the regular meeting on August 1, 2019.
Motion to approve.
Rebecca makes motion to approve, Ryder seconds. All in favor? Lynn? Thank you. All in favor, not opposed. Item 5, discussion of possible action on the following items. Item A, EDC funds for baseball field and playground equipment. Mr. J, that was from you.
What it is, just an update, and I think you'll already know that we applied for two $10,000 performance agreements, one for playground equipment and one for baseball fields or softball fields. We're waiting on the decision for next month, and then we'll go forward, hopefully.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
On the swing sets that were discussed, I'm sure that we're gonna make sure that we're in compliance with
Yes, ma'am.
everything that needs to be.
And one other thing on those, we're going to try, and I think we'll be able to do it, is put in an ADA swing also. Not the type that holds the wheelchair, not the ramp style, but the harness style.
Oh, yes, I've seen those. That would be nice.
One of the things though that I want to, following up on Lynn, with that other equipment that's installed, you know, the National Playground Foundation, you know, they've got all this stuff going on, they require a certain amount of padding, be it whatever. And I want us to, if we're going to go ahead and do that, redo all of our other playground equipment so we can bring it all up to the safety standards.
That's the plan, one step at a time. But, you know, unfortunately, playground equipment, as Martin said last night, is very, very expensive. So, yeah, it's going to take us a while, but a lot of it being done in-house will help go a little farther than what we could if it was outright buying.
I just have one other question. Do we have any idea where that's gonna, where it's gonna be located in the park yet? Or?
Most of it will be located right there where the existing playground equipment
Oh, I
is.
see, okay.
And we have a lot of the border material that we have, so we can add on to it. It don't have to be in an oval, it don't have to be round. It can be, you know, set up in different dimensions to make everything fit.
So we're probably gonna see a plan or something like that before everything gets started. Okay, great.
Is that accurate? Are you gonna be coming to council with a plan for approval or are they going
Just
Well, we're
forward?
gonna bring the plan to show y'all, and of course, if you don't like it, you can tell us, you know, we want a swing set, or we want monkey bars, or we want this or that over there. But
right.
we'll have a basic plan brought to you, hopefully in the next month and a half.
I think as it was stressed last night, the issue was the timing. In fact, a lot of things this year are different than they were before, and we needed to put that request in this meeting to have it reviewed before the next meeting and voted on, and that's the end of this year. So we'd like to get it in this fiscal year, get financing. Any more discussion? Okay. Item B, set a deadline for hotel occupancy tax fund applications. I would like to get this deadline set. Me, in the perfect world, it'd be September 30 or October 1, so that we could get this funding in line, people know kind of what they're gonna be eligible for. Because it's prior to the actual event, they won't be funded until after the event, but you have to let them have an idea of what they're gonna be eligible for. So, if council agrees, I'd like to set it for September 30.
That's gonna be the deadline for them to get in their applications.
That's still 6 or 7 weeks away, so we've got plenty of time to get those applications. If we'll get it on the website, get an email out to all of the normal, regular folks that use the hot funds, and make sure they know that there's bids coming up. Council would rather put it later, I don't think it'd make that much difference, it's just up to you.
I'd like to see a coordination with the EDC, because a lot of these fund requests make appeals to both groups, and so if we can kind of coordinate.
Well, that, you know, you're, exactly, remember we discussed that last year, and their budget is coming up too, so the closer to budget, we can get this, there's not time to do it prior to budget, but closer to the finishing budget that we get this done, we can definitely coordinate with EDC.
So, if I may, do you know when the EDC does, hear those requests and distribute those funds?
I think it's changed, off the top of my head, I don't remember when it was last year.
Well,
It
maybe they
seemed like
can
we were about
coordinate.
6 months apart before, but the fact that if the city council is clearly set in September 30th, then the
Maybe the
EDC
EDC
could
follows suit.
work, yeah. And just because the deadline to apply is September 30th, we still have time to make decisions. Coordinate maybe discussions.
And their funds normally come out of their carryover incentive, promotion line. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make a motion to set the deadline of September 30th for the hotel occupancy tax fund applications.
Second, Bryce. Any discussion? All in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Okay, item C is set compensation of municipal officers for fiscal year 2019 and 20. This is something, again, budget-wise, that has just come up. So many stuff, the legislature is just going at it this year. Jill, you want to go ahead, please?
Sure, so when I was going through the city council files to see, make sure everything is accurate and up to date on the records, I came across the this form, I'm even gonna try to say all those words. And I reached out to the attorney's office, and this is not a city form, this is a state office form that somebody in the past in the Treasury Department printed, copied, and gave out to council members, and this is useless. So there's nowhere, and I've searched and searched and searched to see when it was voted on or what happened to set the fees for the compensation at $10 a meeting or the mayor's $50 or whatever that is. I can't find it anywhere. I've searched and searched, and according to local government code 141, the compensation has to be set yearly on or before the election, so it would be included in the budget. And this came from the attorney's office, Matt Longoria. Secondly, council members cannot deny payment. They don't have to cash the check, but they can't say, I don't want payment. So everybody has to get paid whatever it is that they agree to, that you guys agree to yearly. A lot of cities, I was told, and I did ask some of my city secretaries today, you know, some cities only get paid $1 a meeting, they just never pick up their checks, but the city can't. So my question to the attorney was, could you say, for instance, I want my money to go to Boys and Girls Club. Well, the city can't donate that on your behalf. You would have to do that yourself after you get paid. So this is all, and I put the statute in there from the local government code for you to read so that you know what it's about. So we're gonna be, so what we need council to do is pass an ordinance or a resolution, one or the other, before January for this upcoming year, which would be 1920, to state what the fees are, and each year it has to be done.
So let it be after budget though, so we don't have to
It needs to be done before January 1st. The sooner the better, so that we can get it in this next budget year.
Didn't
So
you
that's
just-
something you'll need to discuss, if you want it to be the same. I don't know when or how it came about, like I said, I've asked Suzanne, several people, we've looked back, and there's no ordinance and there's no resolution for it. It could have just been done in a meeting that isn't electronic, but it has to be done by ordinance or resolution.
And I can remember when I was on council from 2002 to 2008, that the mayor, we voted for the mayor to have a raise because she was having to attend a lot of meetings, and so, but I don't believe that we did it by ordinance or resolution, you're correct. I think we just did it in a regular meeting that we voted on, so I
So
don't think there
if you
is
guys
any-
wanna decide that, you want it to
What
stay
is
the
the check
same.
now?
It's $10 a meeting right now and $50 a month for the mayor,
60
or 60 a month for the mayor. So that's what the fees are now,
And that's in effect now?
yes.
So I need to start taking my check, is what you're saying, and cashing it, or
Well-
I can't donate it back to the city.
That's right. Or you can not pick it up and it just won't get cashed. They said a lot of people do that too, so. I mean, it's whatever you wanna do, but the city has to pay you for your services. And it can be as little as $1. But it has to be something.
Right.
So to clarify, by January 1st, you want us to come up with whatever this is going to be for next year's, around August timeframe, deciding on the budget for the next calendar year in October.
Well,
Or is
yes,
it
by then,
actually-
unless you wanna discuss it now and say we wanna keep it the same, $10 a meeting, or you can discuss it amongst yourselves, what you wanna do.
But we don't have a resolution
No.
either, so.
If we decide to leave it the same, we can have a resolution at the next meeting.
Mhm.
So it's up to you guys. Yes, ma'am.
So whatever it's set at, if we don't pick up the check, does that somehow mess up the bookkeeping?
Well, I mean, Amber?
It's just not gonna be an expense through the account. I mean, it's just gonna sit in the account. It's not gonna go into your pocket. It's not gonna leave our bank.
So you're gonna have outstanding checks for eternity.
So you won't be able to spend it, we won't be able to spend it.
Checks are void after
You can
6
void it.
months.
After 100, I think it's 6
If
months.
you just hand it back to her, then she can go back in immediately and void that check.
Jay, what did Dan say about that? About voiding the checks?
We can't void the checks. Now, like I said, if you don't cash it, they void after 180 days.
You can't void checks in there anymore?
Not
We
for this,
can, but
it's-
not for this.
Oh, okay.
Just
If
make
you wanna
sure-
cash it and donate it to something, then that's a possibility as well.
I don't wanna accept it in any form, and I think it's kinda ridiculous that we don't have the option to, you know,
Right,
refuse pay. Did you say this is a state regulation?
It's in the local government code and I put a copy of it in your packet. It's this document right here.
All right, council. You wanna throw a number up there, see where we go, leave it the same?
I mean, I say just bring the resolution, and I think you could leave it the same, and if anybody has anything different to suggest at the meeting, then we can edit it.
Is that kind of what everybody?
I
Okay.
agree with that, just to leave it the
Let's do
same.
that. All right. Item C, request and announcements. Item A is request by council to place items on a future agenda. Anything pressing anybody wants to address? Yes, Jay?
Just an update on the park. Park is still doing very well. Grand total as of now, $121,699. We've had 1,507 residents who use the pass to go to the park. It's gonna start going down a little bit now, of course, because school is starting, and the river is slowing down a little bit, you know, as far as flow, but our E. coli numbers are still great.
Well, we stopped charging after Labor Day though.
Yes, ma'am.
So you're saying the river is still, I'm sorry. the river's still safe to
Yes,
swim?
ma'am, yeah, no,
Right
there's,
now.
got them
Well, we're
yesterday.
still on request by council for items on a future agenda though. That's-
Oh, I thought you said announcement, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Glenn.
I was just gonna say, I saw something where the groundwater district had issued warnings, do not enter the water.
Not with the
Okay,
numbers
can we
that they
discuss
sent
this
us
after we
yesterday.
get through with requests, please? Yes,
Uh,
Rebecca.
my only request at this time would be that in the event Simple City reaches out and is able to come do a presentation, that we would be able to consider adding that to an agenda.
I agree. Anything else? Okay, announcements by council. Go ahead. What about the groundwater district, Glenn?
They, put out a warning today about do not enter the water. And, you know, in previous years, they've posted signs in our park, but evidently they haven't done, so you might wanna check with them.
Yeah, I mean, they sent me the results yesterday, and the numbers were good.
I saw that as well, but today they did, there is something from them that's saying not to get into the river,
Is
Medina
it at the
River.
city park or is it further where it's lower?
It just says
It
Medina
didn't say
River.
where, it just said maybe.
Glenn?
Can we have,
Just,
Jessica from the Prophet, she posted this on the Prophet today.
I've got it right here.
So, Dave Mock, general manager with the groundwater districts, said that it's not just the bacterial levels, it's also the temperature of the water. When it was last checked, it was 88 degrees at the lake, and the river's hotter. And when the water reaches body temperature, the bacteria, more bacteria can grow. So he doesn't recommend entering any of the bodies of water in Bandera County, including the lake and the rivers.
Okay, thank you.
And the blue green doesn't show up in the bacterial count that he's looking at.
All right, anything else on that? Anything else you wanna talk about, council? Okay,
Suzanne,
yes, Jill.
we had late people show up that wanted to speak, and I told them I would ask you if they were allowed to speak after the fact they got here.
Council, do you want to hear from the public after the meeting?
Yeah, can we go back to item 3 on the agenda, visitors to be heard?
Second.
All right, let's do it. All right.
So I'll need you
This
to
meeting.
sign.
Ms. Harvey.
Do you have the
Mhm.
timer?
Just you.
Okay, when I call your name, will you come to the podium, state your name and your address for the record? Limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. Council will not be allowed to address any questions or concerns you might have directly in person here at the table, and we'll just take it from there. So Nancy Harvey?
Good evening and thank you very much. I'll keep this short. My name is Nancy Joyce Lyons Harvey. I am the owner, proud owner of Spirits of Texas over on Cypress Street. I live in Pine Creek, but I am part of Bandera. In Texas history, my real name is Nancy Joyce Goff Ruman, Ruckman, Butler, Hardin, Martin, Seal, Russell, Lyons, Harvey. I have generations of family in Karnes County. The reason I'm addressing you this evening is simple. I moved to Bandera because we love this town, and we loved what we saw, and we loved the welcome we received when we came to look at Bandera. Now this is my home, and I want to be a part of Bandera. Part of what that means to me is that we remove the blinders, stop the squabbling, and save our town from a fate that was suffered by my family's hometown of Kennedy, which is in Karnes County. In the late 1800s, though not the county seat, Kennedy was an up-and-coming town that eventually grew to a population of over 4,400 people, most of whom, according to my grandmothers, I was related to. Now that's gone. The current population is less than 2,100 people. Until the early 1900s, Kennedy, formerly Kennedy Junction, was known as Six Shooter Junction because of the number of shootings that occurred on a daily basis on Main Street, downtown Kennedy. Eventually, that started offending some of the newer generations, so it was named Kennedy, Texas. My great-grandfather laid the cornerstone of the First United Methodist Church in Kennedy, and 22 others in the Central Texas area. His son, my great-great-uncle, was John Wesley Martin. Not necessarily one of the nicest people ever known in Texas history. My great-great-grandfather on my father's side was Colonel William Butler, the gentleman who killed Helena, Texas. My family's roots in this part of Texas are long and deep. I come before you all today to address a poison that I see setting roots in Bandera. Like it did in Kennedy. It destroyed Kennedy, and I cannot, if I can help it, let it happen here. It was apathy, it was squabbling, it was infighting, it was Group A not wanting to get along with Group B. They were not working for anybody but their own agenda. And I would like to be able to form a group of like-minded people so that we can see Bandera be what it truly is, which is the cowboy capital of the world. That's why my storefront looks the way it does. That's why everything I carry is made in Texas, or it's about Texas. Because I think it's too important for us to let it go. And that's why I wanted to address you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, motion to adjourn. Lynn makes a motion to adjourn. Bryce seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? All in favor, none opposed. 5:51, the regular meeting is adjourned. You don't want to break, we'll go straight into the workshop.
That's true.
All right. 5:01, 15 seconds. Calling to order this workshop of the City Council of the City of Bandera. Item 2 is, the workshop is A, discussion of new utility rate study. We talked about this a bit last week. I hope you've had time to do your research, ask your questions, get some answers. We have to file the budget with the city secretary by Monday in order to, it's gotta be on file with her at least 30 days before we can actually vote on the budget. So we need to get it filed with her on Monday, and I would like for council to come up with whatever the utility rate is that we're gonna use, so we can plug that number into the revenues, so we'll know what we're working with for the coming year. Because we're kind of getting into the timeline there where we need to start buckling down and getting some real numbers. So, any discussions, any suggestions?
I'd like to know if the city, does the city administrator have any comments that he'd like to make?
Well, yes, but any way we look at it, we're gonna have to raise rates at some point to look toward the wastewater plant improvements, which will be coming out in the next few years. Like I say, TCQ is not gonna let us do anything else to the wastewater plant because of the location. There are certain things which Rebecca knows about that we can use to help us a little bit there, but, you know, in all facts, folks, the place is worn out. It's probably 50 years old, equipment is in very bad shape, structures are in bad shape, sitting right there on, you know, it's in the floodway, so every time you do have a big flood or rain, you lose more equipment, more property damage at the site itself. So the only way to get ahead of it is to start saving some money back, and unfortunately you have to increase rates because everything is going up as far as, you know, equipment. Pumps have gone plumb out of sight now, you know, compared to 10 years ago. Piping, property, which would have to be acquired to move the wastewater plant. So, you know, unfortunately, it's something we're going to have to look at, and it's right here in front of us. And I think, though, the sooner that we start, the easier it's going to make whenever we get to that point.
If you look at the spreadsheet that Laura did, it's the one that's in color. She took those 3 scenarios that Matthew Garrett suggested and broke them down by real numbers here in Bandera. And you'll see that each is captioned, and so if that gives you anything to work with.
Okay, so where she's saying current, where's that?
Hi, Laura. Hi.
3790, that's the combined water and wastewater on a residential
Correct.
3/4 meter. So with a 1% increase in the water and a 23% increase in the wastewater, that's what brings it to the 4206. I want to, may I?
Yes.
Go ahead. So just really to be clear and spell out the long-term goals, the intention with the increase is to earmark this money for infrastructure.
Yes, now, one other thing that I would like for council to consider, and the mayor and I have discussed this, is a certain percentage of that we could use back for franchise fee to dedicate for streets, drainage, you know, whatever you see as most important on that side. That money cannot be touched for anything but that if it is sent back to a franchise fee for that.
And, is there a maximum raise of rates? Not that I'm looking to hit a maximum increase, but is there a cap?
I do not know.
Okay, and then, is there, how often can you increase rates
You can increase rates yearly.
annually?
There is also, I think it's under an emergency deal, so if something happened and you had to buy water from another town and have it brought in, I think you can make basically an amendment to the rates for certain things like that.
Anybody know the last date we increased?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the last date we increased our rates?
September, last time we set the
A
budget.
year ago?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we went for a 5% increase, if I remember right.
Didn't you say,
I'm sorry.
it's normally 5% is what we
Yes.
get.
I do feel personally, after, really reviewing the information that was provided in the rate study, that we should be increasing the commercial rate more than the residential rate. Another piece is that, and again, we are only talking about increasing the rates inside the city limits to residential and commercial water. Now, on the wastewater side, again, the only increases in the city limits, but we don't even have a separate commercial rate on the wastewater. And I don't know that I wouldn't, I think a separate rate would be justifiable
On the wastewater?
on the wastewater side.
Well, as Laura pointed out, commercial water is only 1.5% higher.
I did point that out in
And
the
I,
last.
being a business owner, I don't wanna see a huge raise, because like I took the hit on the commercial, trash when it went up last year was nearly doubled. So, I would rather see more of the burden on the commercial than on the residents, because most of our residents are not in a position to pay $135 a month for water and sewer, based on 2,000 gallons.
Yeah,
Well, that's based on 10,000, I'm sorry.
and my intention is not to hit the commercial, accounts too, hard or severely, but when I see in the rates outside the city limits, and I'm only mentioning this for the point of comparison, outside of the city limits, a residential base rate is $54.72 for residential, but for commercial, it's $76.60, so it's about 40% higher. Whereas inside the city limits, you don't see that significant of a difference between the residential and the commercial. So if that makes sense to begin to grow that difference between commercial and residential as it's reflected outside the city limits, I think that would be my preference, to go that way, and then again, to have a separate commercial rate for the wastewater. And maybe have an increase on that as well.
Another thing that we could do, besides just raise the rates to whatever y'all decide to raise them, and this would affect all water and wastewater customers, would be to add a franchise fee every month onto the bill.
I think we need to do that as well.
And that would, even if it's in the form of $1 or $2 a month franchise fee, that would generate a couple of thousand a month, which, $25,000 a year, blah, 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 blah. And that could be earmarked strictly for the maintenance of streets or right of ways, but then, the utility fund would pay the general fund, whatever that franchise fee was that he said. Yes, ma'am.
I thought that we weren't allowed to charge, out of the city limits higher than.
Only on the rates. We can add a franchise fee, but we cannot increase the
So we
rate.
cannot increase the rates, okay. So the rates would have to, we'll stay the same, we're not gonna touch the ones outside the city limits, commercial or residential.
And
So I guess I didn't understand what you were saying, Rebecca, about outside the city limits.
I was just pointing out the difference.
Right.
See, you've got a residential rate
Yeah.
and a commercial rate, and there's a significant difference between the two outside the city limits. There's not a
Okay,
significant
I see what you're
difference
saying.
here.
Okay. So we should increase inside the city limits commercial, is what you're saying.
Well, I would really appreciate it if you wouldn't jump up all that much this year.
I
Well,
think a
I
gradual,
understand that, but
I think a gradual increase is important. And I would like to just at least mention, I know this is a workshop, on the utility rate study, but on the garbage side, I would like to see what we can do for both residential and commercial, if there's anything, whether it's with Republic, to be able to offer a reduced service, because the people, everybody, you and me, everybody who gets a utility bill from the city is ultimately looking at their bottom line.
Well, let's take that discussion up at
Yeah.
appropriate time. We know another thing to consider is we're charging different rates for different meter sizes. And Laura's calculations in the city limits, there are 168 3/4 meters, 124
Just 24.
inch meters, and 2 4-inch meters.
This is commercial,
We've got more than 194
this is
connections in the city.
commercial. Suzanne?
Those are commercial.
What?
Commercial.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, because we were talking about the entire city.
No, those are just commercial.
well, and if I might,
Go ahead.
I remember Jay said something at our last workshop that they are the 3/4, but they're really getting just as much water as the 2 inch.
To change the volume.
It doesn't really change the volume. Right.
The 4-inch meters, of course, is like the school, for example, where they have fire lines, and they do need that extra volume. You can't run a
Right.
fire line on a 3/4 inch. But for most residents, a 2-inch meter is really way overboard, unless they have a swimming pool, different things like that.
Somewhere, I don't remember if it was in an email, where was it where you guys provided the numbers of each of those types of meters?
This is it, what's on the spreadsheet she provided. The only residential sites that we have is 437.
Inside city limits, yes.
There's no other larger,
Not residential, no.
So we really could just eliminate those other rates, while we're cleaning this up, because they're arbitrary and,
And we can address that
simplified.
when we set the new fee schedule. Jay, do you have any more to share with us about your over 50 or over 60 or over 70 or?
We're still working into that, and Laura has also come up with some good suggestions here. It's just, we have to make sure everything is on the up and up and legal side, because with new laws and everything, you can't give so-and-so a discount because of age or different things like that. So we have to do a little creative work to figure out how we can come up with some way to, you know, incentivize for people to, you know, if you pay your bill every month, you're never late or something like that, you can get you're eligible for a discount of a certain percentage or a dollar amount if you want to do something like that. But we're still working on that.
Rebecca.
Any input from our engineer after his work and?
We'll meet with him next Tuesday, and he couldn't be here tonight because of some scheduling conflicts, but he does have some suggestions that maybe we can use if everything works right.
And this affordability program, residential ratepayers who qualify as low income may be eligible for a monthly credit. What does that mean?
I'll let Laura.
It's just a suggestion. I was kind of brainstorming, talking to Jay and going over, and we were thinking possibly if for families that qualify based on their household income and size of household, they may be eligible for a discount to be applied. So they would still be charged the same rates, just like everybody else, but because they're low income and would qualify, they would get whatever dollar amount that would equate to, say a $5 credit every month. And we kind of talked about, and you'll see on there, we talked about some other incentives just to help offset the rate increase, you know, possibly giving people a monthly credit, a dollar credit, say if you signed up for e-billing or ACH payment, because that also eliminates a lot of cost on our part. Sending out bills, the postage, the time, the ink, the paper, all those kinds of things. So we would encourage people to sign up for those, and maybe you get a $1 credit if you sign up for e-billing. If you do both e-billing and ACH, then $3. And again, these are just thoughts.
Good thoughts, thank you. Are we talking actual numbers right now? I mean, does anybody want to throw out percentages?
Well, this is a workshop. We can't come up with solid numbers tonight, but we can discuss this, and I'd like to get a feel, and Jay and I would like to get a feel of what you're thinking. I mean, like, if you wanna go with scenario, I don't have my thing like that. But for instance, if you wanted to go for scenario 1, or the baseline, with the water increase of 1% and wastewater 23%, if you wanted to, in my opinion, go 5% and 5% and then 10% on the commercial side, that would compensate for the big jump, not as much as he's expecting, but just something like that to.
So you said for residential water, 5%,
Water and wastewater.
and residential wastewater. And I'm speaking like we're gonna make up a new commercial wastewater rate. I mean, it would be my suggestion. So
And then I'm saying go 10 and 10, and that gives us
10 and 10.
11 and 15. Oh, no, 15 and 15, looking at his 1 and 23.
Just 10 on commercial, huh?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I should not be laughing, it's not funny. I'm just looking at the suggested numbers of 27% increase and 43% increase, and 10 is a small
But that's
step
for
on the way
everybody
to that.
around. That's for everybody across the board, though.
Yeah,
So by combining the two, of course, there's only 128 commercial customers and 497 residential, you know. So I don't know, but I don't believe you can, in good faith, whack the commercial customers right now with doubling their water bill, their wastewater bill.
Can I
Jerry?
say something? That little building over there, 3 days a week,
right.
11 to 4. my bill runs right at $200. Okay?
Oh, another idea that I did have though was adding another tier.
And then my other business. So it ain't, we're talking quite a bit more.
Yeah.
Of course, I use quite a bit more water out there. But,
The,
I'm
well,
just not, I guess, aware of what your philosophy is on why you feel you should raise, just hit the commercial side.
well, I think I did explain that. My thinking behind it was looking at the difference between residential and commercial outside the city limits. We don't have that type of difference between residential and commercial in the city limits.
What I'm
It's not as
asking is,
significant.
why do you feel that,
There should be
yeah,
um,
Yeah.
impact,
what do you mean by that?
impact usage.
Okay,
Okay.
but they're also paying for that already in the increase in volume. And I'm not
Correct.
saying there shouldn't be any difference, but it sounds like there's an attitude that, we won't mess with the residents much because we can whack the commercial side.
It's not an attitude and it's not about whacking anybody.
Yeah, well, that's what it appears. I'm a citizen here.
Yeah,
And
me
I
too.
pay taxes,
Mhm.
resident.
And utility
And
bills.
business,
Mhm.
two businesses, so I understand both sides of it. And that's why I'm questioning why you feel that there should be such a big difference between the two. But
I
that's
didn't
justified.
necessarily say that there should. I'm actually saying that there's not a very big difference right now. Should we be bringing it up to match what's going on out here? And and it's based on suggestions from the experts. One thing that I did wanna bring up, an idea that I had too, was adding another usage layer. So you've got 0 to 2,000 gallons. What if we could see even a smaller usage category baseline for some people that don't use as much water? I don't know what your usage would be in the 3 days a week in that small time, but that could apply to someone in a similar situation.
So 0 to 2,000 is $37.90. If you use 0, it's $37.90. If you use 2,000, it's $37.90.
Excuse me, what are you talking about?
Under our current, looking at the spreadsheet,
Okay, you're looking at the combined water and
The combined water
wastewater.
and wastewater.
Got it.
because wastewater is based on water.
Mhm.
So what are you talking about?
A
Do
lower
the-
usage
Do the 0
rate.
to 1,000 gallons.
Or 0 to 1,500 and
Yeah, I don't know.
it's
Those
just
two
an
things.
idea.
Oh, like make it 21.50 for 0 to 1,000
Or something
or
like that.
500 or whatever.
Yeah.
you
Just
want.
another tier.
Another tier. Doris has her hand
Yes, Doris.
My answer to you is, as a resident,
Doris,
if they,
you go talk to
okay,
us. honey.
my answer to you is, as a resident, if my rates go up, I have no way to raise my income to meet those rates. As a commercial business, even though I know that we don't wanna price ourselves out and they have a lot of other issues, at least they can raise some of their rates to meet those needs. As a resident, we cannot.
Thank you.
Anybody?
I think, I guess want to think of kind of a big picture before we try to settle on numbers, and so I'm using, my utility bill is $65 a month, I don't use much water, and I have just one trash pickup. And you said trash isn't part of this, but in terms of our bill, it is, we just think of the bottom line. So if we go with scenario 2, that would cost me an extra $13 a month, bring it up to $78. You add franchise fee, franchise tax, that's bring you up to $80. If garbage rates go up in the next year, that'd be $80-some. So that jump from 65 to 80 something mentally for probably a lot of our people would seem like a huge jump. So it's not a little jump, but if we need to make a jump like that, that would be one thing. But if we're going to start making jumps like that every year, if that's what the need is, then I think we need to anticipate that.
Well, I want to say this too. this increase this year is, we don't have to do anything at all. But if we're gonna get ahead of the maintenance and operations, the interest in thinking, the things that are coming upon us starting last year for this new water system, new and improved water system that we're building, we need to get ahead of it. And I don't, you know, we've made one big leap, and that was 5 or 6 years ago, and then we steadily increased 5% across the board every year, so water and wastewater. And we're not making any headway, so I don't know how we're gonna approach this, guys.
Well, my opinion is we need to increase a little bit every year so that it's not, yeah. Yeah, we have to do the increase. It's just deciding where we wanna do the increase and how much we wanna do the increase. But I think that's a given that has to happen. It's just part of our economic development as well. We have to, it's a vision for our economic development.
I'm with you on that, as far as the incremental increases. If you can achieve the same thing by doing it in small amounts, even if it's even maybe more often, I think
Yeah,
it's
change it.
much more beneficial. You can anticipate a lot more as a business, as you know.
Once a year.
Right.
So as a business owner that uses a lot of water, but also as a resident, I can see why, you know, these rates are actually pretty good for what we have here. And looking at outside the city, there's a big disparity, as she mentioned. And what this is for is to help fund a water project that's coming up possibly within the next 6 or 7 years. And if we don't do much of an increase, we're not gonna have much leverage to get what is needed so that everyone even has water in the first place, which is the only reason I'm really supporting that. I don't wanna see that. The suggestion from the expert is 27% or 23 up to 27% and 43%. So what we're looking for is a lot less than that. But it's to fund what we need to, I can't,
That's understandable.
I don't wanna raise.
It's Tony.
From a projected budget perspective, and I'm all for gradually increasing it. I know we have a lot of issues. It's been neglected for quite some time, and we've got a big dollar amount coming ahead of us, and if we keep growing the way we are, we can't keep ignoring it. So I understand all that, and I appreciate the efforts of trying to move ahead. My biggest concern is, and I do know that the utility fund is separate from the general fund, but when it comes time for budgets and stuff, and you're talking about being ahead, if we're trying to increase that money, is that gonna be put into a separate account earmarked for future utilities and not used for general day-to-day this year, and then all of a sudden we get down the line and try to fund a project and say, wait, we don't have all this money that we said we were gonna have, which I don't necessarily, I mean, I know that that's your intention because I was involved in the original discussions, but I think that that's a general fear of being told one thing and actually following through with another. We get that at every level of government, and so I would like to know more about how you're gonna do that.
And what I would like to see is we apply that franchise fee of $1 or $2 to every customer, inside, outside, commercial, residential. That franchise fee has to be paid to the city. Now, there's a budget line item that says franchise fees, but this is not where that would go. This would go under the streets department for maintenance of streets and right-of-ways, if that's what council designates it for. But that's the purpose of putting it over there. It's kind of, it would be kind of like a restricted fee. I mean, if the, you know, if the OST blew up and the town caught on fire, then yeah, we have to spend every penny we got. That's a whole different deal. But for somebody to just go in and inadvertently move it from line item here to line item over there to use it, wouldn't happen.
So my biggest issue and the biggest reason for asking this is people tend to move that money into areas that could basically be contained at the level that they're at. Office supplies, new equipment, I mean, things that don't actually support the long-term goal of what this money should be for. Raises, additional staff. whatever those things are, I'm just using those as examples, I'm not saying that we've done that. I'm just saying that it's easy to see when you go into budget and you say, oh, we have all of this money sitting here. Well, if we're supposed to wait and spend that 6 or 7 years down the line for a bigger project to increase the utility department and to support that, you know, that money shouldn't be spent for anything else unless it is an absolute emergency.
Well, I believe-
That we should live within our means is all I'm saying, and not because we have this extra money to decide we're gonna spend it somewhere where we have never spent it before.
Well, this money that I'm talking about, this franchise fee,
I'm talking about bigger picture, but yeah, okay.
Mhm.
I'm talking about, you can use that as an example, but I'm talking about rate increases in general.
So,
well,
if
that's
I
what I'm
may-
saying. I'm saying a moderate rate increase and then put this franchise fee on top, which goes specifically for streets and maintenance. And I'm talking maintenance of the right of ways. If we have to cut a street or set a meter or whatever, it's not cheap for us to do those things.
I understand.
And so it's taking away from the streets, budget that way.
So the franchise fee piece was suggested specifically because right now the utility is not paying the city back for work that it has to do on the infrastructure. So the utility needs to fund that side of it. Now, on the budget and the water rate increase, that
Which is
needing
what my
to
question was
be
going on.
earmarked.
Yeah.
I did bring that up too. That is the idea, that we're saving this money for a specific capital improvement. And so that's gonna be up to the council at any given budget season, to manage that money.
Right, and that's the biggest fear, is you
Well,
sit here as one council and with the intention of one thing, and if that money goes into an account, I mean, what's the fail-safe for the next city council to come along and get convinced that they have to spend it for something else? Is that, you know what I'm saying?
I
I'm
know
not
what you're
blaming
saying, but I
anything on
think
you,
you're talking
and I
about
don't.
a possibility that we could sit here and control.
Is it not? I mean, is it
Well,
not?
Jay, is there a tool?
I mean, there is a way, you can put money into CDs and things that, you know, that have long-term interest, like, so if you start putting money into a thing, and then once you get to a certain point, you put it in a CD that says it doesn't mature, I'm just giving this as an
Yeah,
example.
as an
It
example.
doesn't mature for 5 years, and that CD is for a specific municipal, you know,
Are there
utility thing.
any accounting tools or regulatory, pieces that would apply to a situation like this?
Like Tony says, CD is a great way to do that, but you can earmark a line item, and is it 100% guaranteed? Absolutely not.
Right.
Someone could come along and change,
Vote for
you know,
something
the whole
else.
world, but education, you know, if you keep explaining, we need this money here for the street, or for water, or for sewer, whatever, you know, that, we don't touch it, we leave it there, let it build, so we can carry that over and over. And we
And
can
again,
use that.
We're counting on our councils being scrupulous. We're not counting on the, as in the event when someone put $350,000 into the general fund out of a CD and didn't bother telling anybody. That's not.
But also
that's-
recognize that in 5 years, none of us might be here. And so, how do the next group look at that? They might not see it with the same urgency that we do.
Well, then Tony will come to that meeting and set them straight.
We've gotta do something, guys. I mean, yes, Bryce.
So if I'm hearing what just happened here correctly, if we tell the citizens that we're taking more money for this reason, there's nothing that can be in writing or a tool or anything that can keep that money from being respent at a future time.
I don't know of anything right off the top of my head. I mean, I can ask attorney and see what they have, but I don't know of anything myself.
I know we had a question, it wasn't, I don't even remember now what the subject was, but, I believe Monty was still our attorney, and he said that, councils cannot bind future councils. That-
We're taking the money from the citizens for a very specific reason to fund what they need in the future, and yet that money can still be touched. Just
Right?
it's not fine.
This
That's what it's
council
for.
right here would never dream of doing that, ever.
Mhm.
Who knows what a council 5 years down the road might decide to do, you know?
I understand it, but we're telling them why we're taking their money.
And that's
So-
why
And
we're
that is-
taking the
Unless we're gonna
money,
refund it
and
back
then
to
they
them.
will have
Should
to
be a way
explain
to
why
earmark
they're
it.
taking the money.
No. Okay.
Yes, Doris?
5 years down the road, that water treatment plant's gonna be needed.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, this isn't enough money to do that.
Well, I think that's a really important piece for every consumer is to see the city very actively pursuing other funding sources which are out there, which are available, so that it's not all on the back of the consumer.
Oh,
What would be the reality, has it already been looked into, the city issuing bonds and trying to raise the money to do the project now, and then take that rate increase to pay back the bonds from everybody that purchased them in 3 to 5 years, or whatever it winds up being? Has that even been looked at as a possibility? And then in the long run, that could possibly save money on doing the job, because you're doing it 5 years earlier, 7 years earlier, so you're not looking at.
Keep some money in this.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't earmark the money, that would obligate the money.
Right.
Yeah.
So, good
No, we're
idea.
cooking.
well, one of the things, and this is sort of off the subject, when we get the tax rate increase, there's something called INS, interest in sinking, and M&O, maintenance and operation. And any tax increase designated to those two categories has to be used for that purpose. And this would be very much along the same lines. Lynn?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were talking about doing, small increments, increases. If we do a bond, that will have to be approved by the citizens, and it would be a substantial raise, I'm sure, so. Are they gonna approve it, or we're gonna be back to square one?
Yeah.
Although it is a good idea. But
Well, basically since 2014, that was the first budget that Glenn and I did. We went up 20% in 2014. So there's 20, 25, 15, 30, 30. We've gone up almost 40% in our rates over 5 years. 40%. I got 20 the first year and 5 every year after. And according to the rate study, we're still so far behind, we might never catch up. Yes,
one of
Glenn?
the reasons we had to go up so high, like the garbage rates were passed on, we just paid them, we didn't pass the fee on to the users. It's just bad government that we're having to cover.
Y'all wanna throw a number out there so we can plug it in and start playing with it? Yes, Glenn?
I don't think you can do that. That would be like polling, wouldn't it? I mean, if you start asking which of these rates you want and everything, I think the way a workshop's supposed to work is you listen to the comments, what you've been doing, and then the staff comes up with a number based on that discussion and brings it back to council for approval.
And so what I'm asking for is a more specific discussion, because we've jumped around, I've thrown out 5, 5, 10, and 10, and a $2 franchise fee, and we're talking about increasing everything but, increasing the commercial rates. Jay, are you getting an indication of where council's trying to go with this?
Not exactly, no. I mean,
Well, I would say I would agree with the franchise fee. I can't tell you a number, but I would agree with a franchise fee across the board.
Yeah, I would say $2. You mentioned $1 or $2. $1 for me as a payer would be annoying and it wouldn't really accomplish much. So I think $2 would be earmarked toward street improvements. So on that part, I think we might have a consensus.
I just wondered, is there a reason that we don't wanna go up more than a couple dollars on a franchise fee? I just.
For me, it's because we're also going up percentages.
I'm sorry?
For me, my reason is because we're also raising the rates. And so it's $2 plus whatever the percentage increase is.
But that amount is gonna be earmarked for sure.
Yes.
Whereas the increase may not be, is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
I don't think we have figured out a way that we can guarantee what we intend to spend the money for 5 years, 8 years down the road.
Yeah, I understand that,
Sure.
but I'm just
It'll be
asking.
earmarked,
The
but-
franchise fee is actually earmarked for it, even though it still can't be guaranteed, correct? Whereas the
Absolutely.
percentage increase, it's not earmarked per se for anything.
No, well, we could.
See, and that's why as a taxpayer, I would rather pay more on the franchise, knowing what it's going for, or at least hopefully.
Right.
It stands a better chance of going for that
Well,
than
one-
just a
I think
percentage increase overall.
option 3 is a combination of franchise fee, added capital, which is what we're talking about, taking a portion of the revenue, 5% or whatever it might be, and putting it somewhere. But earmarking it again for something else. So, again, I agree with the franchise fee, and I think that's a more equitable
Yeah,
way.
and let's say that either way it was gonna go up $20 a month. I'd rather see 10 or even 15 go into franchise than $5, the $5 on the increase side, just because I would feel better, even though it's probably a state of mind more than anything, because you can't be guaranteed that it's gonna be used for that. I think it stands a better chance being used for that, and I think that future council members will consider that that's what it's earmarked for, and we probably shouldn't touch that.
But
Is
it
that
not-
correct, you think, or not?
What I'm thinking is that, that franchise fee does not help with the wastewater. Am I
Not
correct?
unless you identified it
Unless-
to the
okay.
wastewater.
So you
but
can't do that.
Like Jerry is saying, and one other kind of, it's not a guarantee, but, you know, our auditors come in and look at this, you know, so if money's not used right, they're gonna give the opinion on that. Now, does that save that money or bring that money back to spent? No, but it dang sure puts the ding on you, and then you're starting to be looked at by Big Brother even more. But like you say, if you if you dedicate $10 a month to franchise fee wastewater, $10 a month franchise fee streets, that is the only place they can go. And it's a lot easier to keep track of that way also. Where you're putting it into through your rates, you know, that also has to be used, some of that's gonna have to be used for your daily operations. So, you know, more paperwork, more bookwork, yes, but I think it's a very good way to keep track of the money a little bit tighter.
And that's also, if you don't mind, that's also a consistent number. It's something that a business can deal with more than a percentage increase, you know? Does that make sense? See, so I'm not, I apologize for earlier, but I'm not against the increase.
Right.
And even as a business or a citizen, it's just kind of like the Social Security dilemma we're in. You know, the government's been taking it from it, and it should be there for us, but it's not. And boy, I sure would be upset 5, 6, 7 years from now, whenever the plant, we could have actually built it, and the money's not there. You know, that'd be a big disappointment. So.
On the base rate, I'm just talking percentages, but not percentages, if you'll follow me here. A $5 fee on the base rate of $37.90 for residential customers would basically be no, it's not, it's 1/7. Be 14%.
With the $5
The
franchise.
$5 would be 14% of the base rate.
So
which is-
if you were doing, say a $10 or even $15 franchise fee, just for example, how would that affect your percentage increase?
Hang on a minute, it's not, $37.90 is the base rate.
10% is $3.70.
muffled.
Oh, I'm actually, we're at 37.98.
Okay, $37.90 is your base rate.
10% is $3.70,
Yeah.
so, 20% would be $7.40.
So 7.6 is correct, yeah. Okay, so let's say it's 8%. I think in ways that people don't normally think, but so above the, whatever percentage council has to go up on to make daily operations, basically this is another 7.6% on top of that, which would be put aside. So you get a relative feel of where it is on your. No, it is 14%.
What number?
How, 37, 37, yeah, it's 14%. I was right the first time.
$5.
No, I'm on again. No, I don't know, I don't have my calculator with me. Anyway, that's a percentage that we would go. 370 would be 10%.
$5 is
I think 14 is right.
13.2? $5 is 13.2.
What?
13.2.
Of 37.10, so 10 would be what? If you look at it that way, it would, go on,
26 point.
would it double? Well,
$10 would be 26.4%.
maybe the same amount of money, but for me, I would feel a lot better doing something like that, once again, because I feel there's a better chance that that money's gonna be there for that down the road than just putting it in to the general.
Except that we've got to
And
cover
I'm not talking
operation too.
residents.
Yeah, we do have to
I was-
have the increase.
Right.
We do have to have the increase in the rate as well, though.
Well, I know you need both, but maybe not as much on the other side.
Right.
Is
Because
that
we're more on
correct?
the franchise side.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we getting? I think I got an idea. If I just had a.
Can you
Thank you,
break that down
Council.
for us, Suzanne?
Um,
You said you have an idea, can you break it down for us?
Well, what I'm thinking is what I had said before. Because we always put 5% every year.
Right.
Continue to go up 5 and 5 on the residential. Go up 5 on water and 10 on wastewater on commercial.
Yeah.
And then add a $5 franchise fee.
You
And we'll
need
work the numbers out, see how much it's actually gonna be, and then drop that down to $2 if that's a more feasible number for the residents to live with, and us business owners.
And you had originally talked about earmarking the franchise fee strictly for streets. But if we go 5%, then we would want some of that for future wastewater, correct?
We could
So
very
that-
well, but we're
isn't
not
that
even
the
gonna,
point of raising,
if we take $1 of that or $2 of that, half of that, put it toward future wastewater, it's not gonna amount to enough. I mean, we're looking at $10 million, $7 to
then what are we
$10
doing
million.
with that money then?
Hmm?
What would we be doing with the $5 franchise fee?
That will be for street maintenance and right-of-way maintenance. Because our lines run through there, just like the telephone company, we maintain their little whatever, anyway. That, it would be a maintenance fee for right-of-ways and streets.
So
because-
we would be doing nothing toward preparing for the future? Under that
Well,
scenario?
I don't know that we'd be doing nothing, but we would have to do a significant, because we're looking in 5 years, we're not looking, another 30 years down the road when
Right.
the water problem started that everybody ignored till we got it. If we had a longer timeline, it might do good, but if y'all wanna designate something toward the future sewer plant, so be it.
Well, wasn't that the whole point of having the new gen study of saying, okay, this is gonna be coming due, these are the things that you have to consider doing in order to be ready?
Yeah, I think it's important to be clear, there's two different pieces that we're looking at with the rate study. One is the franchise for the streets, to repay the general fund for the work that it has to do in
Right.
order to access lines, utilities. And then the other piece is the rate increase for the future projects, for the capital improvement.
But if we're only talking a 5% raise, that's just maintaining the status quo of what we've been doing.
Exactly.
So it does nothing for
Right.
the future, if that is the amount. Which
See,
I'm not saying
that's
is
the
right
point I
way to
guess
go,
I missed. I
but-
thought some of that franchise fees was going toward the
Now, I think,
wastewater.
well, I think
part.
you made the suggestion, and that may be one way to do it.
Okay.
But there's also something called an added capital. If you look at franchise scenario 3, that's rate increases of ridiculous numbers, and 50 on the water, 69 on the wastewater, adding a franchise fee and adding added capital fee, which is like $1 on every bill goes strictly into this little escrow for future sewer plant.
How many of
That's the
full
water
dollars?
increase at 50%, though.
Yeah, that is, so add franchise fees and cash capital, water increase 50%, water increase, wastewater increase 69%, scenario 3.
Which is how much
just
are we
close up
going to
shop.
be able to, as individuals and businesses, bear?
Shut
I mean,
everything up.
No, I don't think anybody's suggesting that we go with scenario
I know.
3.
No, I'm just saying it's a possibility.
That's why I laughed at too, because I don't think you would.
No, it's just a
kidding.
possibility, there's options, yes ma'am.
Two pieces that I would like to see considered is an added base rate of 0 to 1,000 that does not increase. Base rate 2 being the one that we increase from 1,000 to 2,000.
So you want us to reduce our budget? How do you want us to forecast who's gonna use 500 gallons?
Does anybody is that something that can be looked at in the program? Do we have any customers that are using less than 1,000 gallons a month? Is that something that we can see?
I can pull reports.
I'm not
of
asking you to
consumption.
do that right now, but
No.
it is something that there's data there.
I believe so.
So, and I'm not saying to reduce what they pay, I'm just saying to not increase. So it would add that other tier for a low usage customer, and their rates would not increase, so base rate 2 would be increased. I would also suggest eliminating the other size categories and unifying that, the base rates. On the meter, yeah, eliminating the other categories of meter size. And I would add the commercial wastewater category to have more of an increase. And it's really hard to say what percent to consider in
Well,
terms of an increase, I don't.
Yes, Jay?
And one other thing you can also consider is tap fees, impact fees, stuff like that for, new services. You could look at, raising them 10% or whatever number you might come. We don't have a huge number, it's not just rolling over at us,
All
but
right.
any of it is better than what we had.
Right.
What information are we going to be privy to for the gentleman that could not make it tonight? You said next week we'd get information from this, that may help settle some of this out?
Sure, whatever information he provides, of course, you're always welcome to it, and I don't know exactly what he's gonna produce for us either, but he did say he wanted to put
That's
his 2
something.
cents in for us also.
Derek is an engineer, he's not, an accountant or that numbers kind of guy, so, I have asked Ben Rosenberg to come down when we start our tax rate workshops to explain to you guys and the public what the impact of INS and M&Os, so we might be able to adjust later on the tax end of it rather than all of it on the water end. And you know that's dedicated, so let's just start crunching numbers.
When do we have to make a decision on the? We can't make a decision. Not tonight, I know, but I guess it'll come to the agenda.
Well, it has to be after the annual date that we set it last time. Sometime in September.
Yes, Jay?
Jill just suggested, let us put some different scenarios together, throwback, and then, like I say, whatever Derek might have, and, see what's out there. So, we can, X number for franchise fees, for example, or different scenarios that way, different scenarios with increases, tiers, all of that.
I'm
Based
gonna
on the
comment to
number of
that first.
connections.
Yeah, for budget purposes, we're just gonna pick a simple number, because we've gotta post this thing on Monday file it with the secretary. So it's gotta be, it's gotta be filed with the city secretary and on display to the public for 30 days prior to be adopted. So,
What has to be,
it's a draft, the draft of the budget,
the draft of the budget, okay,
yes.
needs to be
That's
posted
something,
on
this
display.
thing that we're working on, I'm sorry, it's the draft of the budget.
Okay.
Has to be filed on Monday. So I think with council's consent, we'll kind of kick around some ideas and see where it takes us and, yes, Rebecca?
When you do that, Jill, the
Yes.
scenario, or you guys, when y'all, as you're working on that, it might be helpful too, I think, for everybody to see the bottom line. So what is the cost with garbage also? What is it gonna say on my bill, or his bill, or your,
Sure.
Right.
If I could just kind of mention this under her breath too, this needs to be done every year, correct? So when was the last decision made?
Last year.
September.
September during
So-
budget
During budget.
discussions.
Okay, so we've got
Yeah,
a month and a half to get this done.
So we've got until this year, yeah. So the way it happens is the budget is adopted, the tax rate is adopted, the fee schedule is adopted, the utility rate schedule is adopted. Whatever else is left of it. But we
6 weeks
adopt
on
all
this
of those
budget.
things after we adopt the budget.
We have 6 weeks on this, what we're talking
And I think we've got some workshop schedules for budget.
So many workshops.
Is this your first budget? Okay.
Thank you guys for the accounts and the numbers and everything.
Anything else, council, on the legal study? Okay, motion to adjourn. All right, motion to adjourn. Second, any discussion? All in favor? All in favor, 6:47, meeting is adjourned.